He was in a coma for months, hearing every word they said about ending his life. But when the nurse whispered a secret she'd hidden for years, everything changed. Stay with us until the end of the video to learn this secret, and let's witness what happens together. The dim light from the hallway barely filtered through the half-open door of room 308. Inside, time seemed to stand still. The air was cold and sharp, and the only sound that repeated like a stubborn clock was the beep of the heart monitor. Beep, beep. Each sound was a reminder that Matteo was still alive, but motionless. Lying down, Matteo's body did not respond. Eyes closed, pale skin, wires across his chest. Everything about him seemed lifeless, except his soul, because inside, he could hear and feel. Nurse Sophia entered the room with soft steps. She was carrying a clipboard, but what she was really carrying couldn't be seen. She looked at him for a few seconds, took a deep breath, and carefully tucked the sheet up to Matteo's neck. With her other hand, she stroked his hair with a tenderness that cannot be learned in school. It was different. It was intimate. It was love, but a quiet, almost forbidden love. She said nothing, but her gaze fixed on his face spoke for itself. She stood there as if waiting for an answer, a miracle. After a few seconds, she smiled a little sadly and turned to leave. Before closing the door, she looked at him one more time, a look full of things that were never said. Inside, in the darkness of Matteo's mind, everything was sound. He heard everything, the wheels of the medical cart creaking in the hallway, the quick footsteps of the doctors, and above all, the voices. He's not going to wake up. His brain is no longer responding. It's only a matter of time, said a firm male voice. Probably a doctor. Matteo felt a tightness in his chest, but he couldn't move. Another day, a cold, direct female voice entered the room. He recognized her immediately. Victoria, his sister. This is like a soap opera. Enough is enough. No, he's not coming back. You'd better turn off those machines once and for all. Matteo wanted to scream. He wanted to say that he was there, that he had heard, that it wasn't time to give up, but his body still wouldn't obey him. Inside him, a strong pain grew, a sadness that didn't fit in his chest, as if he were invisible, as if he were already dead, but forced to keep hearing things he should never hear. Sophia came in again later, quiet as always, but this time she stayed longer. She sat down in the chair next to him, took his hand, and for a moment closed her eyes as if seeking strength from her soul. Matteo felt the warmth of her hand, and felt for the first time in days, perhaps weeks, something different, something alive. Sophia took a deep breath and whispered, "Matteo, I don't know if you can hear me, but I need to tell you something." She swallowed. Her voice trembled. "I loved you when we were teenagers. You never knew, and now, taking care of you, I fell in love again. I feel like that young girl with her first love, with butterflies in my stomach." Matteo felt something explode inside him, a mixture of surprise, pain, tenderness. He remembered her, her smile at school, the embarrassment he felt when he looked at her. Sophia squeezed his hand, and a tear fell from the corner of her eye. "Wake up, please." Dawn slowly arrived at the hospital. The hallway was empty. The clock read almost 3 a.m. The yellow light from the ceiling cast shadows on the walls, as if time were waiting for something. Inside, in room 308, the silence was louder than anything else. Not even the machines could be heard clearly, only the constant, insistent sound of a heart that was still beating. Sophia entered slowly. She was carrying a folded blanket and a half-empty cup of coffee in her hands, but on her face she carried something else. Tiredness, yes, but it was more than that. It was a weight on her chest, a nostalgia she never dared to accept. She stood next to the bed and looked at Matteo for a long time. His face was the same, eyes closed, breathing guided by machines. The same silence, but to her he was still the same boy as before. She moved the chair, sat down, rested her elbows on her knees, and stayed there looking at him as if searching for a sign, anything, a finger moving, a different sigh, nothing. After a few seconds, she put the coffee down, took a deep breath, and in an almost muffled voice said, I need to say this." Her throat closed up. She looked at the door, made sure she was alone, and looked back at his face. "I don't know if you can hear me. Maybe not, right? Maybe every time I come here I'm talking to emptiness, but I still need to say it. She leaned in a little closer, took his hand in both of hers, closed her eyes, and let out a voice that was now more tremulous, more sincere. Do you remember before we started dating? You were the funny one in the group, the one who made jokes even in the worst moments, and I was just the quiet girl in the back seat. You didn't even see me, but I saw you. I thought about you every day, and then life went on, each of us going our separate ways. I thought I was going to forget you, but she paused for a long time. She bit her lip, trying not to cry. When I saw you here that first day, lying between life and death, my heart went crazy. I knew you were still you. And in these months taking care of you and talking to you, not knowing if you could hear me, I fell in love again, just like before. But now, with everything, with fear, with pain, with hope. She rested her head on the mattress next to his hand and let out a whisper full of pain. Wake up, Mateo. Please. Just give me a sign. Just give me anything. Show me that you're still there. Silence answered. For a moment, everything stood still. No sounds, no wind, no movement, just her. The tears held in her chest, and Mateo's hand. And then something happened, slowly, very slowly. A tear fell from the corner of his eye, a single tear, almost invisible, which rolled down his face until it was lost in the white pillow. Sophia saw it and froze. She slowly raised her head, looking directly at his face. The tear was still there. She brought her hand to her chest, surprised, scared, excited. Mateo, did you hear me? The silence continued, but now it was a different kind of silence, a silence full of hope. The day dawned gray in that hospital. Mateo remained the same, his body still, his eyes closed, trapped in a world of his own. Earlier than usual, heavy footsteps were heard in the hallway, heels tapping firmly. It was Victoria. Her face was serious, her hair pulled back in a tight bun, her makeup light but cold. She didn't look like a sister visiting her sick brother. She looked like an executive entering an important meeting. She stood at the door, took a deep breath, and entered. She didn't bring flowers or gifts. She just walked in, looked Mateo up and down, as if observing a painting in an exhibition, and made a dry comment. He's the same. Nothing has changed. She stood there next to the bed. She didn't touch his hand. She didn't say his name affectionately. She just looked at him. Then, without saying a word, she left the room and went straight to the doctor's area. There she found Dr. Jaime, an experienced man, accustomed to desperate families, but not so much to that kind of coldness. "Doctor, we need to talk." He motioned for her to sit down, but Victoria remained standing. "Look, it's been over 3 months. I want to know clearly how much longer this is going to last." Jaime frowned. "Victoria, we're still monitoring him. Every case is different. Your brother is stable," but she interrupted him impatiently. "But he's not going to wake up, is he? You can be honest with me. He's hooked up to machines, and this is becoming a burden." The doctor tried to remain calm. "I understand that it's difficult, but there's still brain activity. We can't just—" "I'm his closest relative, doctor. If there's no progress, I want us to discuss the possibility of ending this. This isn't living." Across the hall, behind the glass, a standing figure heard everything. Sophia was holding a tray of medicines, but when she heard the tone of the conversation, she stopped. She stood there, hidden, listening to every word, her eyes wide, and her heart pounding. She knew. She always knew that Victoria never loved her, but now she understood that the problem was much bigger. That woman wasn't just tired, she seemed ready to end it all. Sophia leaned against the wall, trying to calm the fear that was beginning to grow in her chest. She wanted to run to the room, hug Mateo, protect him, but she knew she couldn't act like that. She held back her tears, took a deep breath, and whispered softly, just to herself, "I'm not going to let this happen to you. I won't let it." Because there, at that moment, Sophia understood the magnitude of the danger, and also understood that more than ever, she had to stay and fight. Meanwhile, in Mateo's mind, the sound of rain on the windshield was still fresh, hours before the crash. Although he was now trapped in that motionless body, the loud noise of the raindrops mixed with the tension in his chest would not go away. It had all started hours before the accident. That same morning when he went to his sister's house for a conversation that had been postponed for too long. Victoria's apartment was small, tidy, with no pictures on the walls, a place where even the silence felt uncomfortable. Matteo walked in ready to argue, but even so, he didn't expect it to be so ugly. "You came to ask me for money again." Victoria crossed her arms without getting up from her chair. Her tone was contemptuous. "No, I didn't come to ask for anything for myself," Matteo replied, his voice tense as he tried to remain calm. "It's to settle the will. Our parents' house is still in your name. I just want us to be fair." She laughed, but it was a joyless laugh. "Fair? You talking about fairness now? How funny. You, the spoiled child, the good son, the one they loved. And me, what was I?" Matteo was silent for a few seconds. He knew that pain. It came from far back, from when they were children. He tried to change the subject. "We have to settle this. It's been too long. I don't want to fight with you." But Victoria stood up suddenly. She pointed her finger at him, her eyes full of rage. "You don't want to fight? You never wanted anything, Matteo. You only showed up when it suited you. When they were dying, I was the one who cleaned up their vomit and took them to the hospital. You would come, kiss them on the forehead, and leave like the perfect son. You were working. You always had an excuse, always the innocent one. They never saw who you really were. And now, you want half the house. Go home, Matteo. Go take care of your perfect little life." The atmosphere became unbearable. The two stared at each other. She was trembling with anger, he with sadness. For a moment, it seemed that neither was going to give in. But Matteo took a step back, took a deep breath, and said in a broken voice, "I just wanted us to be able to put this behind us." "Not me," she replied dryly. "I'll never forget what you took from me." Matteo left her house with his head spinning. He got into his car with a heavy heart, started the engine, his eyes still teary, and drove off aimlessly. The rain grew heavier. The lights of the other cars looked like lines on the glass. His mind was far away, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong between them. It was on a sharp curve near the bridge that everything went dark. The car skidded. The crash was sharp, loud, as if the world had stopped for a second. After that, silence. That night, while Matteo's body was rushed to the hospital, Victoria was at home, still angry, still talking to herself. She didn't know what had happened, but inside her, without wanting to admit it, she already carried a hidden guilt, a guilt that was born along with resentment since they were children, and she realized that she would have to share her parents' love with a brother who shone brighter than she could bear. The days passed slowly in the hospital, as if time were also afraid to move forward. There, in room 308, the world was still small. A bed, a window where the sun hardly ever shone, and a silence that was only interrupted by the regular beeping of the machines. But there was something different now, something that didn't show up in the tests or the doctor's notes. It was the way Sophia took care of Matteo. She would arrive early before her shift started. Sometimes she didn't even change out of her uniform yet. She would just stand at the door of the room, look at him for a moment, and then enter quietly with a tenderness that cannot be learned in any school. In the first hour of the day, she was the one who washed his face with a warm towel. Each movement was slow, almost like a dance. It wasn't just nursing care, it was affection. She spoke softly to him, although she didn't know if he could hear her. Sometimes she told him about the weather outside, about a patient who smiled, about a bad cup of coffee she had, just so he wouldn't feel so alone. "Good morning, Matteo. Look, the sun came out a little this morning, but it's cloudy again, just like yesterday," she said in a calm voice, as if talking to a sleeping baby. "I don't like it when the day turns out like this, you know. But when you wake up, everything changes. I swear it does." She combed his hair carefully, running her fingers through it before using the brush. She cleaned every corner of his hands as if she were cleaning something sacred. She adjusted the collar of his hospital pajamas, as if she were getting him ready to go out. But he never went out. Even so, she didn't give up. Sometimes, when work was quiet, she would bring a small radio and play old songs. Songs she remembered hearing with him when she saw Matteo walking down the hall with his backpack slung over one shoulder. She would smile at the memory and hold the music close to his ear. "You'll remember this one, right? It was your favorite band, wasn't it?" she would say with shining eyes, waiting for a sign that never came. But even though there was no response, she remained there, day after day, without missing a single one, always with that same calm, loving manner. And when no one was looking, she would squeeze his hand tightly, close her eyes, and silently ask, "Please come back. Just come back." She knew that she might be loving someone who would never return, that she might be giving everything for something that no one believed in anymore. But she didn't care, because deep down, taking care of Matteo was the only thing that still gave her life meaning. It was as if every little thing she did, changing the sheets, moistening his lips, caressing his arm, was her way of saying, "I'm here, even if you can't see me." The sun had barely risen when Victoria arrived at the hospital with an even harder expression than usual. She didn't look at anyone, didn't say hello, went straight to the doctor's room, knocked on the door, but entered without waiting for a response. Dr. Jamie looked up from his papers, surprised by her haste. "Doctor," she said firmly, "it's over. We can't go on with this anymore. Help me end it all. I've already filed a lawsuit against the hospital." He frowned in confusion. "What do you mean, end it? I want you to disconnect my brother's machines tomorrow. It's been too long. There's no point in continuing with this. He's not coming back, and I'm tired of hoping. I have to get on with my life." The doctor hesitated. He tried to explain that there were still protocols to follow and tests to be done, but Victoria was firm and insistent. She said she was legally responsible, that she had already spoken to a lawyer, that she wanted to speed up the process, and that it was her right to be the only one to make the decision. She spoke as if she were completing a formality, like someone signing a contract without tears, without trembling, without pause. Sophia heard everything from the other side of the wall. She was going to get Matteo's new file, but she stopped when she heard Victoria's cold voice in the hallway. And right there, with the paper in her hand and her heart pounding, she understood. She ran to room 308, entered agitated, looked at Matteo lying there unresponsive, and the tears came before she could stop them. She sat down next to him, squeezed his cold hand tightly, as if she wanted to protect him with her whole body. "Matteo, I think she did it. She's going to disconnect everything. Are you listening to me? I know you are. I know you're there." Her voice broke. The crying overwhelmed her. She rested her forehead on her hand and spoke softly between sobs. "I'm not going to let this happen, okay? I promise you. I'm going to fight, even if I'm alone, even if no one believes. You're going to wake up. You have to wake up in that place where only Matteo existed." Matteo felt everything, not with his eyes or his ears. It was another kind of sensation, as if his soul were listening directly in his chest. Every word, every tremor in Sophia's voice reached him like a current inside. And he tried. My God, how he tried. He screamed inside with all his strength. He tried his hand, his fingers to lift his head, to speak, but nothing happened. Nothing. It was like being buried alive. His body didn't respond, and that hurt more than any blow, more than the accident. It was the despair of seeing everything fall apart, of feeling love so close and not being able to do anything. He wanted to say, "I hear you." He wanted to beg, "Don't go." He wanted just a second of freedom in his own body to prove he was there. But it was like being locked inside himself, banging on the walls with no one listening. The only thing he still had was what he felt. And at that moment, that was everything. He felt her fear. He felt her love. And more than anything, he felt that he still had a reason to fight. The night fell heavily on that hospital. It was the eve of the end. The next day, by Victoria's decision, they were going to disconnect Matteo's machines. Sophia knew it and was there, sitting by his side since early morning, not moving even to eat. Her eyes red from crying so much, her voice hoarse from whispering words of hope. She squeezed his hand tightly, as if that could keep him from leaving. Suddenly, the silence was broken by her own pain. She took a deep breath, swallowed, and spoke, not to herself, not out of desperation, but as someone who truly needed to get something off her chest, as someone who needed to cleanse her soul before it was too late. "Matteo, I need to tell you something," she said in a low voice, trembling, looking at his fingers that didn't move. something I kept to myself for a long time, because I was a coward, because they made me afraid of you." She closed her eyes for a moment and then let it out. "I had a daughter. Your daughter. She exists. She has your smile, your way of rolling your eyes when you get desperate. And you never knew because I didn't let you." The silence grew heavier. Sophia squeezed his hand tighter. "Victoria found out about the pregnancy before I could tell you. She came to my house and told me that you had a secure future, a career, everything, and that if you knew about the baby, you would lose it all. She said I was useless, that I was going to ruin your life, that your parents would take everything away from you and kick you out if you showed up with a child. She made me believe that if I really loved you, I had to let you go without saying anything." The tears couldn't be stopped. Couldn't be. She was shaking, not from pain, but from guilt. "I believed her, Matteo. I thought I was doing the right thing for you so that you would be okay. But I was wrong. I was so wrong. And now I may lose you forever, without even asking for your forgiveness." Inside, in the darkness where Matteo's mind was still fighting for space, something broke, like cracked glass. His chest tightened. His breathing, although guided by machines, seemed to change rhythm. And suddenly, without warning, the heart monitor beeped. His hand clenched the sheet tightly. Sophia saw it and stopped. "Matteo, can you hear me?" She took his hand in both of hers. Now she put her face on his chest. "Please, give me a sign. Any sign." And then Matteo's fingers moved again. It was almost nothing, a slight tremor, but real, alive. She sat up with her eyes wide open. You moved your fingers, Matteo." She looked around. There was no one there, just the two of them, and she knew it. She felt it. It wasn't imagination. It wasn't blind hope. It was him. Matteo was there, still trapped, still weak, but waking up. Sophia knelt beside the bed, excited, crying as if she were witnessing a miracle up close. And at that moment, even without moving, even without speaking, the two were together again, because her love had finally reached him. The next morning, before 9 o'clock, Victoria arrived at the hospital walking quickly, her heels clicking loudly, as if she wanted to attract attention, her eyes hard, her mouth serious, without a hint of doubt. It was the day she had chosen, the day when everything was going to end. Sophia, who hadn't slept, was in the hallway with a clipboard in her hands, trying to talk to the doctor to wait a little longer. She was tired, but with a glimmer of hope deep in her chest. She had seen Matteo's fingers move. She felt that he wanted to come back, but before she could explain anything, Victoria came straight at her like a hurricane. "Can you stop that?" she said in a firm voice full of venom. Sophia took a step back, surprised. "Victoria, please just listen to me for a moment." "Listen to what?" "Another one of your romantic stories. Another lie to delay what we should have done weeks ago." Sophia remained silent. She tried to stay calm, but her hands were shaking. "I saw it, Victoria. Yesterday he moved his fingers." A tear rolled down her cheek. "He's fighting. He can't." "That's enough," Victoria interrupted, her face red with anger. "Who do you think you are, huh? Just on the day we're going to let him go in peace, he moves. You're testing my patience. Matteo isn't going to wake up. He's not going to get out of that bed. And you're going to be left alone with that daughter you decided to hide." Sophia swallowed hard. She felt the world spinning for a second. The words hurt her deeply. "Victoria, she's his daughter. He had a right to know when I was pregnant. She deserves to know who her father is. And they don't know each other because you made me believe it was better that way. And do you really think he would have chosen you? A woman who has nothing, a simple nurse, alone, with a child to care for. He would have thanked you for disappearing. That's what you should have done from the beginning." Sophia didn't answer. She just let a tear fall silently. She stood there, looking at that bitter woman who spoke as if she wanted to hurt her as much as possible. "You know what?" Victoria continued, now in a lower voice, but still full of rage. "You were the one who ruined everything. You were the one who cheated on him, who hid a daughter. I put ideas in your head. Yes, but the decision was yours. And now you want to play the heroine. Matteo is never going to wake up, and if he does, he's not going to choose you. He never did when you left. Did he look for you? I don't think so, did he?" Sophia closed her eyes for a moment. She took a deep breath. When she opened them, she looked her in the eyes and said in a firm but pained voice, "Maybe he never chose me, but I chose him. I loved him silently, even though he pushed me aside at one point. And if he wakes up, he'll know who stayed." Victoria didn't answer. She just looked away like someone who is losing inside, even though she wants to win on the outside. Her anger was great, but her fear was greater. Inside that motionless body, where time seemed to stand still, Matteo lived in silence. But inside, his mind was not still. On the contrary, it was full of images, sounds, and feelings. And that morning, just after hearing the argument between Victoria and Sophia, even though he did not open his eyes, something began to stir deep inside him. Memories came flooding back, not as clear scenes but as fragments of emotion, like old blurred photos that hurt just to remember. He saw himself as a child, running around the yard of his house, his knees scraped from playing, and there she was, Victoria, older, more serious, always with her arms crossed, watching him from afar. At that time, they didn't fight, but they didn't hug either. She always seemed distant. Matteo remembered his mother calling his name, smiling, paying attention to him, laughing at the jokes he told. And he also remembered Victoria's look at that moment, a look that no one noticed, but that he now understood. It was the look of someone who felt left out. Then came school. He excelled, won medals, and was praised by his teachers. Victoria remained silent. She would come home from school quietly, her notebooks pressed against her chest, and every time his parents celebrated one of Matteo's good grades, she would leave the room without saying a word. He never understood it, never saw it as painful. He thought it was just the way she was. But then the strongest memory of all hit him like a blow to the chest on the day of his parents' funeral. He was dressed in black next to the coffin, his eyes filled with tears, but he was surrounded by people, loved ones, friends, neighbors, people who held his hand, hugged him, cried with him. Victoria. Victoria was sitting in a corner, alone, with no one around her, her gaze lost, her face dry. No one asked her if she was okay. No one said, "I'm sorry." She seemed invisible, as if she were just part of the background. And he didn't even approach her, because he thought she wanted to be alone. Now trapped in that bed, he understood. She never wanted to be alone. She just didn't know how to ask them not to forget her. Her resentment didn't come out of nowhere. It came from pain, from abandonment, from silence that turned into anger over the years. And he, without knowing it, was part of that. He was another person who unintentionally left Victoria in the dark. And worse, it seemed normal to him. There, in the place where only the soul can reach, Matteo cried again, not from physical pain, but from regret. The hallway was empty when Sophia gathered her courage. Her heart was beating so hard that it seemed to echo off the walls. With sweaty hands and a lump in her throat, she walked toward the room where Victoria was sitting, talking to the social worker about the funeral arrangements. The white hospital lights made everything feel colder, but Sophia couldn't wait any longer. Victoria called out in a calm but firm voice. Victoria turned slowly, like someone who already knows they are going to hear something they don't want to hear. "What now?" she said wearily. Sophia took a deep breath, stepped forward, and spoke with eyes full of truth. "He moved his fingers last night, and it wasn't a reflex. I saw it. I felt it. Matteo is responding." The silence that followed was tense. Victoria looked at her as if she were looking at a little girl who believes in fairy tales. "You never tire, do you?" she replied with a dry laugh. "This is ridiculous. I swear I'm telling you the truth. I was there, holding his hand. He heard what I said. He reacted." Victoria rose from her chair, her eyes wide, breathing heavily. Her pain turned to fury. "Enough. Enough of this. You're making it up. You're deceiving everyone. You're using my brother to revive a teenage romance that never even existed. Do you really think a tear and a moving finger change anything? Of course they do. Because he's alive. Because he's trying to come back. He's not coming back," Victoria shouted, already crying. "He doesn't want to come back. And if he does, it's to run away from everything he destroyed in this family." The shouting attracted attention. Nurses appeared at the door. A doctor arrived in a hurry. "What's going on here?" Victoria pointed at Sophia, trembling with rage. This woman is preventing us from ending this suffering. She's delaying everything with her illusions. I want the machines turned off today. Now. Sophia, her eyes filled with tears, held back her crying. He doesn't deserve this, Victoria. And what do I deserve, huh? She shouted, her voice breaking, for having grown up forgotten, taking care of our parents alone while he was the pride of the house, watching him disappear, come back, and still steal the little piece I tried to build. She walked out quickly, her heels clicking on the hallway floor. The sound felt like thunder inside Sophia, who stood there, unable to do anything, clinging to the only thing she had, the truth of what she felt. Inside, lying in the darkness of his mind, Matteo heard everything, not with his ears, but with his soul. Every word his sister said was like a knife, and at the same time, a mirror. He remembered the night his parents died. He had gone on a trip without warning. Victoria was left alone, taking care of them, seeing the most difficult part. He never came back in time, only showing up at the funeral as if it were a visit. He thought it was enough to cry and say, "I'm sorry," but now he understood. It wasn't enough. He had left her alone, and now, lying in that bed, Matteo saw it clearly. Victoria wasn't just cruel. She was a broken, wounded woman, and he, even though he didn't want to, helped create that pain, and that hurt more than anything else. On that cloudy afternoon, Victoria entered Matteo's room with silent steps. She was in no hurry. She wasn't there to argue or fight. For the first time, she entered as someone saying goodbye to someone she loved, and who also hurt her. She stood next to the bed, looked at his face for several seconds, his eyes closed, his body still, only the regular sound of the machine filling the air. She took a deep breath and began to speak softly, as if he were going to wake up at any moment. "You know what's funny, Matteo? We spent our whole lives fighting, and even now, here in this silence, it still feels like you're challenging me." She let out a slight, uncomfortable laugh, mixed with sadness. "I came to say goodbye, not because I want to, but because I have to. I thought I hated you. I swear I thought that for years. For everything, for being the son they chose to smile at, for being the one who disappeared and was still remembered, for leaving me here alone with everything." She walked to the window without taking her eyes off the gray sky and slowly returned to the head of the bed. "But the truth is, I miss you. When we were kids, your annoying laugh, the times you teased me just to see me get angry. That time when we were still brothers, you see? You know, before the world became this place full of pain." He paused for a moment, feeling the words hurt his throat. "I'm not bad, Matteo. They just hurt me so much. And no one saw me. No one listened to me. Not even you." He put his hand on his arm for the first time in years. A timid touch, as if touching a past that still hurts. "I'm going to move on. I'm going to try at least, because living like this, with this anger, with this weight, is killing me, little by little. I just wanted you to know that deep down, you're still my brother." She kissed him on the forehead, with tears in her eyes, and left the room without looking back. Inside, deep in his mind, Matteo screamed. He tried to move a finger, turn his face, do something, but nothing. His body was a wall, but his soul was crying. He heard every word, felt every pain, and wanted to respond. To tell her she wasn't alone, that he blamed himself too, that he wanted to come back. But all he could do was keep a whisper of consciousness inside himself. Shortly after, Sophia ran to the doctor with a heavy heart, her face tired, but her eyes still full of hope. "Please, just one more day. Just one day." Dr. Jaime shook his head doubtfully. "Sophia, the family has already decided. You know that." "I know, but he's responding. I felt it. He's here. He just needs more time." The doctor looked into her eyes for a long moment. He saw something there that cannot be explained by studies or charts. He saw faith, love, desire, and then he sighed, defeated by the truth that only she carried. "All right, one more day, but it's the last." Sophia thanked him with a slight gesture, without saying anything, and ran back to the room, because now it was all or nothing. The end of that afternoon seemed the same as all the others. The sky was cloudy, the hospital was silent, and room 308 was filled with a painful silence. But something inside Sophia told her that this day was different. The last day the doctor had allowed was coming to an end, and she knew she couldn't waste a second. With trembling hands, she took a small wallet out of her pocket. From inside, she took out 3 photos worn by time. She leaned down to Matteo's face, which remained motionless, but which for her had never been so present. She sat on the edge of the bed, pulled the chair over with her foot, carefully adjusted his pillow, and spoke softly, close to his ear. "Matteo, I brought something to show you." She took a deep breath, placed the photos on his chest, and then lifted them one by one, holding them close to his face. This is her at 1 year old. It was the day she took her first steps. She fell 3 times and still smiled, just like you, Matteo. She smiled slightly, her eyes moist. This is her at 4 years old, when she first asked me who her dad was. I lied to her. I told her he was far away, that he was a good man, but he couldn't stay. I cried all night after that. The last photo was more recent. The girl with her hair down, drawing in a notebook with her head bowed, a pink bow beside her. And this was yesterday. She's 7 now, Matteo. 7. And she still asks about you. She still asks why you never came back. She placed the photo on her chest, and then, her voice breaking, said almost in a whisper, "She needs you alive. We need you." A tear fell on Matteo's hand, and that's when something changed. First, a slight tremor in his fingers, then a movement in his face. His mouth, which until then had been completely motionless, seemed to want to say something. His forehead moved as if trying to react, to fight against his own body. Sophia's eyes widened. Her heart was pounding. "Matteo, Matteo, can you hear me?" His fingers slowly closed around the photo. His breathing quickened. A soft sound came from his throat as if he wanted to speak. My God, you're coming back, you're coming back!" She jumped up, ran into the hallway, screaming for help. "Nurse, doctor, someone come!" He's reacting. He's responding. The doors opened, and quick footsteps filled the hallway. The room filled with people, but to Sophia, it was as if only the 2 of them existed there, because for the first time in a long time, there was real, living, beating hope. And it had all started with the love of a daughter he never knew. Victoria was sitting in the car, still in the hospital parking lot, when her cell phone vibrated. A short message sent by the same doctor. Just 1 line, but it made her heart freeze. Matteo showed a significant response. He's waking up. For a few seconds, she didn't know what to feel. She sat there, still, staring at her cell phone as if it were a cruel joke. What she had said so many times would never happen was happening. Instead of feeling relief, peace, or joy, what she felt was a knot in her stomach. She put her cell phone on the seat next to her, started the car, but didn't move. Her hand on the steering wheel trembled. Her chest ached, and anger came as a reflex. Of course he had to come back right now, right after everything, she muttered to herself, her eyes filled with tears. What for? To look at me with pity? To tell me he forgives me? As if I were the one in the wrong again. Her face hardened. It was sadness, anger, fear, all mixed together, because deep down, she didn't feel ready to see her brother awake. Not like this. Not after everything she had said, everything she had done. She thought she had prepared herself to lose him, but she had never prepared herself to see him again. Still, minutes later she was walking up the elevator, her gaze downcast, her steps heavy. She didn't know what she was going to say. She didn't know if she wanted to apologize or throw everything in his face again. She just knew she needed to look him in the eyes. She needed to know if there was still a bridge between them. When she entered the room, time seemed to stand still. Matteo was there, his eyes half open, his face still weak, but awake. He was breathing on his own. His hands moved slowly over the sheet, and he saw her. Their eyes met. For a second, the whole world disappeared. Only that gaze between them existed. Victoria's breath caught in her throat. Her heart raced. It was as if someone had stripped away all her layers of protection. She was stripped bare of pride, of appearances. All that remained was her and the guilt. She tried to speak, but couldn't. Her throat closed up. She stood there still, feeling her legs give way. "Matteo." That was all she managed to say. A whisper, a name, but it was enough for him to blink slowly. Recognizing her, Victoria brought her hand to her face, trying to hold back the tears that finally came. She cried not out of relief, but because of everything she had kept inside for years. Everything she hadn't said out of fear. Fear of that brother who was now looking at her, and who might remember everything. Sophia was sitting next to the bed as always, her hands intertwined with Matteo's, her eyes tired from so many sleepless nights. But her heart was beating fast. She felt that he was close, very close. Suddenly, without warning, she felt a slight squeeze on her fingers. She looked up in surprise. Matteo was moving. Once again she jumped up, stood next to the bed with her hand over her mouth, and then, as if time had started moving again, he slowly opened his eyes. First one, then the other. A small movement, but so powerful that it filled the room with a light that did not come from the sun. He blinked as if trying to understand where he was. Then he turned his head slightly and saw Sophia. She was there, crying silently with a smile that mixed pain, love, and such great relief that it barely fit on her face. Sophia said softly, as if she didn't want to startle him, "You're back." His eyes sparkled. He still couldn't speak, but his eyes said it all. He recognized her. He knew who she was. And more than that, he knew that she had stayed, that she had believed in him until the end. Sophia leaned over and rested her forehead on his. Tears fell freely, wetting the pillow. It was a moment without haste, without words, just a reunion of souls who never stopped loving each other. On the other side of the door, Victoria watched silently. She did not enter. She said nothing, just stood there watching the two of them together. For a moment she closed her eyes. Her face, hardened by so many years, looked tired. And when she opened them again, a tear fell without her trying to stop it. It was a different kind of tear. It was not anger or guilt. It was a beginning, a little piece of pain that was starting to let go. A sign that maybe, just maybe, she was the one who needed healing the most. Without making a sound, Victoria took a step back and left, leaving for the first time a space for something good to be born, instead of everything that had always been only pain. The room now had a different energy. The sounds of the machines were still there, but they sounded like background music, no longer a reminder of pain. Matteo could now add up with support, move his hands, and say short sentences. Recovery was slow, but it was still alive. And that day, something bigger awaited him. Sophia entered slowly, her eyes shining with excitement and nerves. At her side, a little girl with brown hair and a curious look squeezed his hand tightly. The girl seemed a little scared, but she couldn't take her eyes off the man lying there. Matteo's heart raced. His hands sweated. He swallowed hard and looked directly at the girl. "Is that her?" he asked in a low, hoarse voice. Sophia nodded, unable to hide her tears. "That's our daughter, Matteo." The girl approached slowly. She looked at him as one looks at an old painting, something she had heard about, but never seen up close. Matteo reached out his hand with effort. "Hi, my name is Matteo. I'm your dad." The girl didn't answer, but after a few seconds she walked very slowly toward him. She sat on the edge of the bed without saying anything and gently took his fingers in hers. Matteo cried, not from pain, but from regret, from relief, from a love that came late, but came nonetheless. "Forgive me," he whispered, looking at Sophia and then at the girl. "I almost lost everything. I almost lost you. Because I was a fool. Because I thought you didn't love me." Sophia approached him and touched his face affectionately. "I always loved you, Matteo. Ever since school. Always. But I was afraid. I was a coward. And when I tried to protect you, I ended up pushing you away." He nodded, moved. "I always loved you too. From that first day you lent me the eraser and didn't say anything. You just smiled." Sophia smiled back at him with tears falling. "I kept that smile. Until today." Their daughter, now sitting between them, looked at them with a shy smile. And there, in that simple but profound scene, three hearts found each other. Matteo took his daughter's hand, looked her in the eyes and said, "I promise that now I'm going to stay, that I'll never leave again." She didn't respond with words. She just leaned slowly, and rested her head on his chest. And there, between silence and love, a family was born. Matteo could now walk with help. He still felt pain. His body was slow, but what weighed most heavily on him was what he carried in his heart. Many things had been kept hidden for years, and now, after returning from the brink of the end, he knew he could no longer hide. He had to look his sister in the eyes. He asked Sofia to call Victoria. He said he wanted to talk to her alone. Sofia hesitated, but she understood. She left the room without saying anything. Victoria entered a few minutes later. She stopped at the door, her face tense. She hadn't expected to see him so awake, so alive. He was sitting in an armchair, his gaze direct, firm, but also wounded. For a moment, the two looked at each other in silence. It was a heavy silence, filled with everything that had never been said. Neither knew how to begin. Then Matteo spoke first, his voice calm but firm. "You almost made me miss the chance to meet my daughter." Victoria looked down. Her chest heaved. "You don't know what I went through, Matteo. I know you suffered. I know you were alone. I know it hurt. But you were cruel. You lied. You hid the truth. And you almost killed me inside before my time." She remained still, her hands clenched, her face tense. Then she said in a low voice, "I was afraid." Matteo frowned. Afraid of what? She took a deep breath. Her eyes began to fill with tears. "That you would leave me, that you would have that daughter, and forget me forever. I was left alone when our parents died. You disappeared. I stayed here taking care of everything, and even when you came back, it was as if you had already left inside." He felt a lump in his throat. His anger subsided a little, but it still hurt. "I left you, Victoria. I was selfish, but you turned into a stone. You chose to hurt me, too." She cried for the first time without hiding. The tears fell hard, as if something very old was finally breaking. "I didn't know what to do, Matteo. I just didn't want to feel invisible anymore. I wanted someone to see me, and when I saw that you were going to have a new life, a daughter, I went crazy inside. I thought I was going to disappear forever." Matteo took a deep breath, got up slowly, approached her, and took her hand, even though it was shaking. "I forgive you, but you need help. Really, you can't go on with that pain inside you. It's going to kill you. It's going to destroy everything again." She cried more without resisting. And there, in that somewhat awkward embrace, two broken siblings found each other for the first time as two wounded adults trying to start over. Time passed a little more slowly in the days that followed, and that was okay, because Matteo needed to feel every second of that new beginning, every breakfast with Sofia, every soft laugh from his daughter in the corner of the room, every short visit from Victoria, slowly trying to come to terms with her own pain. He ran his fingers over the old photos, over the letters his daughter had drawn for him with colored pencils, and on one of those evenings, when the warm sun was shining through the window, Matteo took Sofia's hand tightly and said, "I don't know why God brought me back, but if he did, it was to give me a chance to do everything differently, and I'm not going to waste it." Sofia smiled with tears in her eyes, saying nothing. She just rested her head on his shoulder as if she already knew. "I promise," he continued, his voice trembling. "I'll never let love slip away again. I'll never let what really matters pass me by again." Sofia took a deep breath. The two of them remained silent, just listening to their daughter humming softly in a corner of the living room, playing with a notebook. And there began a new family, without exaggerated promises, without perfection, only with truth, patience, and care. Victoria began to visit more often, still with doubts, still learning to deal with everything, but with sincere steps. And Matteo, for the first time in his life, made room for her. "We're fixing things, right?" he said during one of those encounters. "Slowly, but we're getting there," she replied with a half smile. "But we're getting there." And there, between band-aids on the soul and hugs that once seemed impossible, that wounded family began to mend again, not with patches, but with love. Forgiveness didn't come all at once. It wasn't like a key turning to a movie-like embrace. It was slow, almost unnoticeable, like drops falling on cracked ground, gradually wetting what seemed too dry to bear fruit again. Matteo and Victoria began to see each other more. Sometimes they just sat on the terrace of the house without saying much. The silence between them was different. Now, it was no longer the heavy silence of resentment, but the silence of those who are trying to get used to peace. "Do you remember Mom's cake?" he asked one day, looking up at the sky. Victoria laughed a little. "I remember. You always ate the frosting before she finished, and you cried. Matteo always cried." They were silent after that, but that phrase hung in the air. Victoria looked down and took a deep breath. "I cried for many things. For feeling inferior, for not knowing how to be like you, for thinking that no one saw me." Matteo took her hand, not as a grand gesture, but as a brother would. "A real brother. I should have seen you. I should have stayed." Victoria nodded. She didn't say she was okay, because she wasn't. It still hurt, but now it hurt with company. And so it was, day after day, step by step, that the two began to rebuild what childhood, pain, and silence had destroyed. It was no longer about who was more at fault. It was about not failing again. Matteo began inviting her to family meals. Sophia, even though her heart was scarred, made room for her, and their daughter, with the innocence of someone who doesn't carry the weight of adulthood, began to call Victoria Aunt. Little by little, between conversations, between coffee and shy smiles, that family that had once broken apart began to come back together, piece by piece, as it should be. And what was born from that was not perfection. It was something more beautiful. It was love with scars. Spring arrived quietly. The sky was clearer. The wind was gentler. And there was something on Matteo's face that had not been seen for years. Peace. He walked without help, smiled often, and had that light in his eyes of someone who had been reborn inside. In the simple house where he now lived with Sophia and her daughter, the smell of coffee mingled with the sound of laughter coming from the kitchen. It was Sunday. The table was set, the colorful tablecloth spread, flowers in the corner. The daughter was drawing on paper with colored pencils, while Sophia put bread on the table. Matteo just stood at the door, arms crossed and heart full. He approached Sophia from behind, hugged her waist, and rested his face on her shoulder, saying softly, "I never thought I would have this, and now that I have it, I'm not letting go." Sophia smiled without turning around and replied, "I didn't think so either, but you came back and stayed." Matteo pulled up a chair, sat down next to his daughter, grabbed a pencil, and began to draw with her. He drew a crooked little stick figure with a heart on its chest. She laughed loudly. "Is that you, Daddy?" she asked, laughing. "Yes, it's me, with a new heart." Sophia watched them from afar, the dishcloth still in her hand, her eyes filled with tears. For a moment, she just watched them. What had once seemed like a dream was now real, a family. Truly, that afternoon, as the sun gilded the terrace, Matteo did something simple, but very special. He took Sophia's hand in front of their daughter, looked her in the eyes, and said, "Will you stay with me forever?" Sophia held back her tears, smiled broadly, and replied, "I'm already here, Matteo. I'm staying." And so it was, without a party, without a white dress, without applause, but with the truth that a new life was born. Matteo, Sophia, and their daughter, a trio that had lost each other, found each other, and now walked together with love, with a past, but above all, with a future. Months later, the hospital no longer felt the same to Matteo. The walls were still white. The smell was the same, but now there was something else, something invisible but present, gratitude. He entered slowly with firm, calm steps. Sophia walked beside him, holding her daughter's hand. None of the three said anything. There was no need. The silence was one of respect, of memory, of gratitude for life. They walked down the hallway where one day everything seemed lost, where the looks were sad, the voices quiet, and hope so faint it was almost imperceptible. They stopped in front of a room. The sign on the door read simply, Lucas G. Inside, a young man in his early 20s had been sleeping for weeks. A motorcycle accident. Serious condition. The doctors were already beginning to use harsh words, but Matteo knew better than anyone that sometimes harsh words lie. He went in alone while Sophia and her daughter stayed in the hallway. He approached the bed slowly. He looked at the boy, as if he were looking at himself months ago. He brought his face close and in a soft, calm voice, full of emotion, whispered, "Hey, I know it seems like everything is over. I know you can hear everything, even if you can't answer. I was there too, locked inside myself, and I almost left everything behind." He ran his hand gently over the sheet, close to the young man's hand. "But one person believed in me. She stayed with me when no one else did, and for her sake, I came back." He closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and then, with a trembling voice, but with great sincerity, he said, "Sometimes all we need is someone who believes, just as Sophia did for me." He left the room quietly with a calm heart. Sophia hugged him. His daughter took his hand, and there, in the same hallway where he had almost lost everything, he was now living proof that love, faith, and being present still save lives. What would you do if you were in Sophia's place? Would you stay beside someone who might never wake up or let go? Tell us in the comments, subscribe, and don't miss the next story that will touch your heart.